By the year 100 BC, the Roman Republic had already transformed from a small city-state on the banks of the Tiber into the most powerful force in the Mediterranean. Through centuries of conquest, it had brought all of Italy under its control, subdued the once great power of Carthage after 3 bitter wars, annexed most of Spain, and stretched eastward into Greece and the Hellenistic kingdoms. Carthage, once Rome's greatest rival, had been utterly destroyed, its cities razed and its former territories turned into provinces that enriched Roman coffers. Greece, once the intellectual and cultural beacon of the Mediterranean, had been humbled, and its treasures flowed into Roman temples and aristocratic villas. Rome now stood at the height of its power, a republic in name, but already straining under the weight of empire. At the center of Rome's political life was the cursus honorum, the course of offices, the ladder of public service through which ambitious men could rise. A young Roman noble, often from a patrician family, would begin with minor magistracies, learning the craft of politics. He might then compete for higher offices as his career advanced. Quaestors oversaw finances and administration. Aediles managed markets, public works, and the grand spectacles of games. Praetors served as judges and military commanders, and the ultimate prize was the consulship, the highest executive office in the Republic, held by 2 men each year. Above them all stood the Senate, a council of Rome's most experienced statesmen who steered policy and guided the Republic's destiny. For centuries, this system had balanced the ambitions of individuals with the traditions of collective governance. But by 100 BC, this balance was under strain. Power, wealth, and empire were reshaping the Republic. The first to challenge the system were the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius. They were scions of a noble family, grandsons of the great general Scipio Africanus, and their names carried immense prestige. But what set them apart was their sympathy for Rome's struggling poor. In 133 BC, Tiberius was elected tribune of the plebs, a position designed to protect the rights of ordinary citizens. He saw how the wealth of empire had concentrated in the hands of the aristocracy. Vast estates, worked by slaves captured in Rome's wars, displaced the small farmer, once the backbone of the Republic. Veterans returned from campaigns to find their farms sold or seized, their livelihoods gone. Tiberius proposed a radical solution: to enforce old laws limiting the amount of public land any one man could hold, and to redistribute surplus land to the poor. His proposal shocked the Senate, who saw their own estates threatened, yet it won the support of the masses. Tiberius bypassed the Senate, bringing his law directly to the popular assembly. For this defiance, he was declared a tyrant. In a shocking turn, he and many of his supporters were clubbed to death in the streets, the first political bloodshed in centuries. A decade later, his younger brother Gaius Gracchus took up the cause. More skilled and fiery than Tiberius, he pushed not only for land reform, but also for subsidized grain to feed the poor and colonies abroad to provide new opportunities. He sought to empower the equestrian class, Rome's wealthy businessmen, against the senatorial elite. His reforms threatened the old order even more than his brothers. Violence again erupted, and Gaius, cornered on the Aventine Hill, chose to take his own life rather than fall into the hands of his enemies. The Gracchi brothers were dead, but their legacy was clear. Rome's politics had turned deadly, and blood would again be spilled in the name of reform. Even as Rome's politicians fought among themselves, rebellion brewed elsewhere. In 135 BC, the First Servile War broke out in Sicily, Rome's great grain basket. Tens of thousands of enslaved people, brutalized under Roman masters, rose in revolt under the leadership of Julius, a former slave who claimed prophetic visions and wielded the aura of a holy man. With him was Cleon, a fierce warrior who commanded their forces. For years they carved out their own realm in Sicily, defeating Roman armies sent against them. Their rebellion showed the dark side of Rome's reliance on mass slavery, a system that enriched the elite but left millions in chains. Though the revolt was eventually crushed with brutal force, tens of thousands executed or crucified, it left an enduring scar. Rome's dominance came not only from conquest, but from oppression, and the oppressed would not remain silent forever. The unrest spread even to Rome's allies in Italy. For centuries, Rome's Italian partners had borne the burdens of war, sending soldiers to fight in Rome's legions, yet they remained excluded from full citizenship. They could die for Rome, but they could not vote in Rome. Their frustration boiled over in 91 BC with the Social War, named not for society but for the Socia, the allies. Towns and tribes across Italy rose up, forming their own confederation with its own capital and senate, mirroring Rome itself. They minted coins that bore the proud name Italia. The war was brutal and bloody, fought across the peninsula. Rome eventually prevailed, but at a terrible cost. Realizing they could not continue to exclude their allies, the Romans extended citizenship to most of Italy. The Republic survived, but it had changed forever. Now Italy was united, but the unity was forged in blood. In this age of turmoil, new leaders emerged, none more famous than Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Marius was a novus homo, a new man from outside the ancient aristocracy who rose through talent and determination. He reformed the Roman army, opening enlistment to the landless poor. For these men, the army was not only a career but a path to land and reward. Their loyalty shifted, from the Senate and people of Rome to the generals who promised them spoils. Marius became a hero, saving Rome from the invading Cimbri and Teutones. But his power also made him dangerous, for he controlled armies devoted to him alone. His rival Sulla was an aristocrat of old stock, ruthless and cunning. Their rivalry plunged Rome into chaos. In 88 BC, Sulla, ordered to relinquish command of a lucrative campaign, instead marched his legions on Rome itself, the first time a Roman general had turned his army against the city. Marius fled, but returned with his own forces, seizing the city in turn. Rome descended into civil war, with massacres and proscriptions, lists of enemies marked for death and their property seized. Eventually Sulla emerged victorious. Declared dictator, he rewrote the constitution, curbing the power of the tribunes and strengthening the Senate. Yet even as he tried to restore the old order, his example had destroyed it. By marching on Rome, he had shown that an ambitious general could seize power by force. Sulla eventually retired, retreating into private life, but the republic he left behind was broken. Violence was now part of politics. The cursus honorum was still in place, but its authority was undermined by the shadow of the sword. Into this fractured world stepped Gaius Julius Caesar, a man whose ambition and brilliance would carry the republic to its end. Caesar rose through the cursus honorum with dazzling speed. As a young man, he survived the proscriptions of Sulla, narrowly escaping execution. He charmed crowds with eloquent speeches, built alliances with powerful men, and cultivated the image of a champion of the people. He formed the first triumvirate with Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Together they dominated politics, bending the republic to their will. Caesar was granted command in Gaul, where he waged a brilliant and brutal conquest. For nearly a decade he campaigned, subduing tribes, crossing the Rhine into Germany, and even landing in Britain. His victories brought him untold wealth and the fierce loyalty of his legions. But it also made him a threat. Crassus perished in a disastrous campaign in Parthia, leaving Pompey and Caesar as rivals. Pompey sided with the Senate, who feared Caesar's growing power. In 49 BC, ordered to surrender his army, Caesar made his fateful choice. Leading his legion, he crossed the Rubicon River, declaring, "The die is cast." With that step, civil war began. Caesar marched on Rome, and Pompey fled east. The conflict spread across the Mediterranean. At Pharsalus in 48 BC, Caesar defeated Pompey's forces, forcing his old ally to flee to Egypt, where he was treacherously murdered. Caesar wept when presented with Pompey's severed head, for even in victory he recognized the ruin of their shared republic. Caesar pressed on, defeating enemies in North Africa and Spain. By 45 BC he stood unchallenged, master of Rome. The Senate named him dictator, first for a year, then for 10, and finally for life. Caesar enacted reforms, resettling veterans, reducing debts, enlarging the Senate, granting citizenship more widely, and reforming the calendar into the Julian system still recognizable today. Yet behind these reforms loomed the shadow of monarchy. To many Romans, Caesar seemed a king in all but name, and Rome had sworn never to suffer kings again. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, Caesar was struck down by a conspiracy of senators, including his friend Brutus. They imagined they were restoring the Republic. Instead, they unleashed more chaos. Civil wars followed, culminating in the rise of Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, who became Augustus, Rome's first emperor. The Republic was gone, though its forms lingered. What had begun as a city-state, governed by citizen assemblies and magistrates, had ended as a world empire, ruled by a single man. The end of the Roman Republic was not a single moment, but a long unraveling. Expansion had brought glory, but also inequality and unrest. The Gracchi exposed the deep divide between rich and poor. The Servile War revealed the dangers of mass slavery. The Social War showed the costs of excluding allies. Marius and Sulla shattered the taboo against marching armies on Rome, and Caesar proved that one man's ambition could sweep away centuries of tradition. By 27 BC, when Augustus assumed supreme power, the Republic was already a memory, replaced by the empire it had unknowingly created.